Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. With all the question about the development war here in F1 2022, who's going to come out on top, Red Bull believe they have a significant advantage on this front up against Ferrari, but Ferrari are saying, look, we haven't brought all that much so far this year. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, all that good stuff, would really appreciate it. First of all, thought this is kind of funny, made by Formula 1 Trends here on Twitter, the inverse WC standings. So fair play to Max Verstappen trying to win both of them. Carlos Sainz actually, I think it might be 4th in both of these, so effectively the way this works, if you come last, or if you DNF, that's 26 points. If you come last, that's 25th points, all the way down to P last minus 10 effectively. Also for the sprints, I believe that might be where George Russell picked up his 1 point so far, because Charles Leclerc has managed to avoid it so far. But yeah, the inverse WDC. Goats Tifi's absolutely killing it, to be honest, at the top end. Alonso not far behind, obviously. He's had a really tough time with DNFs and just straight up bad luck so far. Wanted to mention sprints actually real quick as well, because plenty of discussion on sprints after this weekend. Was it a good idea? Do we have a good sprint race? In fairness, you could well argue that without the sprint race, there really wouldn't be much entertainment at all this weekend. Then again, though, if the sprint race didn't happen, we might have had a more interesting grid on the Sunday that then would have created a more interesting race. So definitely a back and forth on this one. This was actually quite interesting because George Russell, after the Saturday sprint race, because basically both Mercedes got stuck in a train. Obviously, like at the end of the day, it's Mercedes' fault for not having a better car that they could qualify better with on Friday, to the point where they were just stuck in a procession, as Russell called it, on Saturday's sprint race. Couldn't really make any progress, in a similar boat really to where Hamilton found himself on the actual race on Sunday. But as Ross Brawn said at the time, whenever my driver had a bad car, he's complained about the race. So I think George's opinion, or the opinion of anyone in the back of the grid, isn't the opinions that we really listen to, right? So kind of a, spicy statement to saying, look, George, your opinion doesn't matter, mate, because you're, bottom 10 of the grid, effectively. We listen to the guys that are actually doing well. He goes on to clarify this and basically says, look, the race didn't feel processional from our perspective. It just isn't long enough to get the quite time degradation that you might need to create some big differences between the drivers and the car. So interesting stuff, of course. And then he kind of goes on to say, look, the opinion at the end of the back of the grid are not the opinions we're listening to. And has now gone on to say, yeah, okay, he's backtracked to a degree, saying, look, we're going to listen to all drivers, but drivers at the back who are struggling with their cars and the sprint format are more likely to criticize it, right? So definitely interesting. They do want to up it next year. We believe, I think this year they were intending to have 6 sprint races. They're going to go for 6 next year. I believe there's a meeting today to determine whether that's going to go ahead. So it does depend. Is it good on is it better to do a sprint race on a bad track or a good track? Because you do it at a bad track, you get a sprint race like we had this past weekend, or at least bad overtaking track, let's just say. But if you do it at a good overtaking track where there's lots of options, then the sprint race is very interesting, but also it means that kind of the grid from qualifying sorts itself out into the order of the quickest cars and the quickest race pace cars by the time you get to the race, right? So definitely an interesting one. The ideas he brings to the table are quite interesting here, actually. Basically saying, look, this is a way that they're planning to get newer viewers effectively into the sports, saying look, the kind of bite-sized idea of these sprint races very much appeals to kind of YouTube compilations, the way social media is going, attention span, this type of stuff. So the idea of having a half-hour race means that newer fans don't have to worry about, okay, this guy's pitted on lap 13, this guy's pitted on lap 17, therefore he's going to have newer tyres. Of course, you still have that all strategic discussion when the real race goes on, but it's kind of a more simplistic, easy to understand race on the Saturday. Also, he does clarify that yes, it does mean that there's more things going on each day, right? Quali, sprint race, and on the Sunday, that's better for the promoter effectively, better for viewership overall. Whether it's good for racing or not, it's kind of tough to say, but it does at least add a bit more interest, I suppose, to the season. And I mean, yeah, we've got 6 potentially coming next year if they agree that's the direction they want to go today. Let's talk Red Bull versus Ferrari then. So far this year, Verstappen and Leclerc seems like that's going to be the title battle this season. Leclerc had a substantial advantage after Australia. The car looked way better there. All of a sudden, Red Bull bring a few upgrades in terms of aerodynamics, lose a bit of weight as well, and now they're looking like the car to beat. So can Ferrari bounce back in the next races? Is it track dependent? Of course, Leclerc still has a pretty substantial advantage, but without the 2 DNFs that Verstappen had, he would have been a P1 in the championship, I'm pretty sure, because he lost, 36 points or so. I think that would have put him P1. His actual record the last 40 races are pretty insane as well, with the amount of podiums he's had. What is this? 38 podiums out of the last 40 races. Not too bad. And Red Bull seem to believe that pretty much in terms of aerodynamics, they've done what they need to do with the car, but now they're just looking to lose weight. And that is their thing, really, comparing the Red Bull to the likes of, Ferrari and the Mercedes. Those cars are bouncing around all over the place with the porpoising issues on the straights. The Red Bull really seems to have that nicely under control. They're bouncing around a fraction, but compared to the other cars, barely anything at all. And just watching them on the straights looks a much, better car, frankly, to drive than the Ferrari and the Mercedes, for example. So they've lost a fair bit of weight right here. They've already they're looking to lose some further weight. The Weight Watchers plan, as they kind of described it, they reckon they can drop maybe another 10 kilograms, which is probably going to unlock a maybe, 0.3 of a second of lap time in addition to what they've already unlocked this past weekend. But they brought some pretty significant upgrades this weekend, there's no doubt. The car certainly looked an awful lot better, and Ferrari didn't really do all that much. They felt, okay, let's just keep this package as it is. tyres, not take any risks, of course, with only one day of testing on the Friday to actually try and work things out. And it certainly worked out in Red Bull's favour this past weekend. And Helmut Marko believes, kind of from the Red Bull side, that there's no way Ferrari can actually match. It's definitely going to be an uphill task for them to match the upgrades that Red Bull have brought through, saying effectively the following: can they keep up with our development rate? I do not think so. He goes on to make some statements about the pressure we're putting on them, the mistakes that have come through from Leclerc and Sainz, of course, and well, that's another question, right? It's not just the cars that go head-to-head, it's the drivers themselves. If Leclerc and Sainz keep making these mistakes they have been, then Red Bull will find themselves in pole position, well, as the season progresses at the very least, to get over the line in terms of the World Constructors' Championship, the Drivers' Championship as well. Who knows on that front? But Marco's confident that Ferrari will not be able to keep up with the development over the course of this year, right? And Red Bull have already brought some things. I'm sure they have more in the pipeline, but it seems to me there's more that the Ferrari can improve upon, really, than where the Red Bull are. So if Ferrari get on top of all of their issues with the potential power unit upgrade that's coming as well, we'll discuss that once again here in just a couple of seconds, then Ferrari probably have slightly an upper hand if they can get on top of all their other issues, right? And we see this going on for Marco as well. It's quite a nice, cute, and he says sportive, friendly competition between Ferrari and us. The championship will be very exciting. Hopefully it doesn't go to the last race like last year. I'm sure he doesn't want that stress once again. But it is interesting because for now, it's a nice, sportive, friendly competition. As the season progresses and it gets to crunch time, then, that's when things get a little bit more, spiteful, you would well imagine. It's, of course, early days here. But again, Mattia Binotto does not necessarily believe they're going to fall behind. He reckons that we'll work on preventing bouncing and updating our aerodynamics package for Miami, and believing some more things are going to come later down the line. So seemingly for Spain at Barcelona, they're going to bring a larger upgrade into aerodynamics, but also in terms of their actual engine package itself, which might have more to give also. So I was somewhat concerned actually after Australia that Ferrari might just run away with the rest of the year. Their car looks way better. They have even more upgrades in the works. But now Red Bull have really put down a marker of how good their car is, putting pressure on Ferrari to respond. And they're pretty confident that they won't be able to do so, right? But this is the thing that's been discussed for quite some time now, that Ferrari has more power to unlock. This first kind of power unit they've been using has been running in a conservative engine mode. They unlocked, I'm pretty sure, another 5 brake horsepower in Australia. We saw that on the straights, actually, they were pretty comparable to the Red Bulls, to be honest, where that certainly wasn't the case in Jeddah, for example. And seemingly, they've got another 10 brake horsepower or more, who knows, to unlock from their next engine, which is coming through pretty much for Spain. So I believe they're working on some effectively reliability upgrades for that second engine when they do put it in the cars. Pretty sure Sainz has part of that new power unit in his car already. We, of course, saw some pretty good success from him on the sprint race, because the race didn't really work out in his favour. But, still, they believe they've got more power there if they fix the porpoising right, because the fact of the matter is, yes, their car is kind of getting away with the bouncing compared to the Mercedes. Still, no real damage seems to have been inflicted on these cars yet, the Ferrari or the Mercedes, even though you'd think just watching them bounce around of the straights, something should be getting damaged there, to be honest. But if Ferrari can get on top of that and the new power, you'd think that they once again grab the upper hand. But of course, Red Bull aren't going to slow down their development rate, and that's just an interesting thing, because it was only after Australia that Max Verstappen came out and said, look, I'm going to need 45 races to catch Leclerc. Now it seems like a very different story indeed after what happened this past weekend, and who knows whether the tune will change once again when we go to Miami, and when Mercedes just bring a crazy update and they start winning races. That seems rather unlikely though, to be perfectly honest. Speaking of Mercedes, we'll touch on them real quick here in just a second, but I thought this is kind of interesting from F24. Actually, Liam says in the reply to the numbers are slightly different, maybe based on sprint races and stuff like that, but apparently Kevin Magnussen has more points all time for Haas than any other driver in its history, so that's pretty cool stuff. This also was kind of interesting, maybe more biased to a degree by the fact that Bottas didn't finish last year's Imola Grand Prix due to the tangle that they had with Russell. I think Bottas at the time was P9, but potentially could have made some progress, who knows. But yeah, so far this year, Russell actually has more points than Bottas did last year, so that was kind of interesting, to be honest. Of course, we saw a good tussle between the two of them at the end of the Imola Grand Prix on the end of Sunday, but Bottas, I think, has been talking about the fact that he's really confident in the progress that Alfa Romeo have made with their car. And just to mention this as well, a crazy statistic actually, just shows the consistency of Hamilton pretty much the entire turbo hybrid era until today. The last time he had 3 straight non-podiums was 2013. He was 7th, 4th and 9th across it with 3 races in 2013. The car, honestly, back then looks kind of, it looks ugly in a way, but I kind of prefer the chrome silver looks kind of nice, to be honest. But this year's car, of course, 10th in Saudi Arabia, 4th in Australia, 13th in Imola, nowhere near the podium, of course, apart from Australia, where he could have maybe had it, if not for engine cooling issues at the ends. But you would imagine this isn't going to be the last time that Hamilton's non-podium run continues so far this season. But just crazy to think he never went 3 races without a podium in the last 10 years, effectively, until this week. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.